Studio Chat. Welcome everybody to another Writer Studio Chat. We are very fortunate today to have, for the second time, Owen Egerton talking with us. He was here last year with Robin Hemley, Michael Martone, Caitlin Horrocks, and himself as the four writers of the apocalypse. Hey, Owen, thank you for coming. What was it like working with those guys?
Oh, it was great. They're writers that I really admire. Actually, and I didn't know them personally until that weekend, and it's been fun keeping in contact with them and all their adventures. You know, Robin has a knack for traveling all over the world and writing in exotic locations. It's been fun to follow him doing that, and then run into them at different conferences and read what they're doing. It's great. It was a great time there. I felt I left, you know, after teaching and reading. You'd think maybe I'd be exhausted, but I left feeling really excited and ready to type again.
That's terrific. Well, you know, if folks didn't see you then, and they didn't take the course that you taught for us when you were visiting,
yes,
what would be different this visit and for this class? And even if they have seen you, why should they come again?
Well, I mean, I think all the events that the Writers Garret do are fantastic. You know, it's a gathering of like-minded creatives, and it just turns out when you put coals together, they all end up growing brighter. You know, it's that weird idea that, you know, usually in American capitalism we tend to believe like, oh, we've only got so much heat, so you got to reserve it and you can't share it, or other people got to steal your heat. But in the arts, it turns out the more you give out and the closer you get, boy, everyone just heats up. So I think there's going to be a lot of that. The course I'm teaching, I'm going to be talking a lot about using dramatic into your scenes and your novels, which is what I do a lot in screenwriting, and taking that. So I'm excited to get really into the specifics of taking a scene from a book or short story or piece you're working on and turning up the tension, of finding the power of it. So a lot of what I think about on a daily basis, and I get overexcited sometimes in getting an opportunity to talk to others about it.
Well, that sounds fantastic. And before we go more into why everyone on the planet should want to move to Dallas just to register for this class,
wow.
Yeah, I think so. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what led you down this very strange path of being a writer?
That's a good question. Let's see. You know, I have sort of wanted and desired to tell stories since I was a kid. I mean, I don't know a kid who doesn't love telling stories and letting their imagination run wild. And that just stuck with me. It turned out that ended up being the way that I interacted with the world, where I wrestled. I remember when I was I don't know, maybe 4th grade, my grandparents' dog had to be put down. And I remember I didn't know how to feel about that. I didn't know what to do with this grief. And I sat down at my little desk in my home, and I wrote the story, a first-person point of view, from the point of view of Norman, the dog, about his last day alive. And it was funny and strange, and I remember writing it thinking I'll go there perhaps desiring answers to all my questions. And at the end, I didn't have any answers. I just had bigger questions or different questions. And I think that's when I discovered, that's what writing is. Writing is a way to experience the mystery and to interact with the mystery. It's not a place to explain the mystery. And I started from there. And then I went on, shortly after college, I quit my job that I had, and I moved into VW Bus because I knew that I wanted to write a novel. And if I didn't have to pay for rent, I'd have more time to work on my novel. And so that's what I did. I worked and worked, and I eventually was able to make some money also performing comedy. It sort of paid a lot of the bills during my early writing, and then I started publishing and selling screenplays. So I'm still in that same place, though. I'm still in that place where I feel heartbroken and amused, appalled, and in awe of something or the world around me, and I go to the words in a way to experience it in a deeper sense. And again, never finding answers, but always finding the questions that define what my life's about.
That sounds excellent. I wanted to ask you, you are a performer, a scriptwriter, and a fiction writer.
Yes.
Do you also write poetry and or songs? How do you classify yourself?
Oh, I'm just a madman of creation. I'm just a petri dish of life and ideas. I write some poems. I'm actually part of a fun group of a lot of creatives, mainly songwriters. I think it's called the Poetry Machine, where I get a writing cue. It's from a fellow writer, a singer-songwriter named Bob Schneider that set this up, and he sends me basically a fragment of a line and says, "Write a poem this week," and that keeps me writing poems in spite of myself. So I do that. Songwriting, funny enough, I have an album out there of humorous songs called Big Thick Wooden Board. That's, I don't know, over a decade ago, but you can hear some of my comedy songs like out there and some soundtracks and once on VH1 and, you know, Dr. Demento type stuff. So I don't, if you call that songwriting, then yeah, I do that. I get excited about lots of different ways of creating. I think it's one of the things I love about film is you get to incorporate so many different styles. But when it comes down to it, I think where my heart really lies is in stories, especially within the novel and the short story.
I don't know if this is a problem, a technical thing, but it looks to me, Ashley, is Owen coming up as the key speaker? Because on my screen, it's always got me showing. Is he coming forward when he talks?
He is.
Okay. I just want to make sure. I just like to. We're still technically working through all these, and when I've seen it in the past, I could see the switch, and this time I'm not seeing the switch. So I just wondered. Okay, well, that's good to know.
Wait, you're filming this? Because I'm not wearing any pants, and I just feel.
Okay. Well, keep your keep
I shouldn't.
this up in your face.
I shouldn't
okay?
stand up. Is that?
No. Yeah, it is being filmed. It's going straight to YouTube. So.
PG-13. Got it.
Yes. Okay. Yes. And given that, I think Ashley actually had a question that she was going to ask that dovetails with what you just talked about. Didn't you have one, Ashley, about music?
Yes. Last year, whenever you visited us, Owen, you discussed, I think it was jazz music and its influence on your writing with how best to avoid dieting your short story collection. And you specifically talked about Charles Mingus and listening to him on big headphones. And in your short story, I believe it's called Of All Places, you mentioned Miles Davis as well. So my question was, do you have any musical influences that are driving your writing this year? And maybe what is your, I guess, writer's playlist for 2014?
Yes. You know, interesting enough, I've been listening to a lot of opera, which I know nothing about. I'm still, jazz is still the place I go to a lot. There's a classical composer, maybe somewhere right between opera and jazz, is a fellow named Graham Reynolds. And I think as I was working on my latest novel, I listened to one of his albums, Why the Sea Has Salt. I listened to it, I don't know, maybe a dozen times in one 24-hour sitting of just keep playing it as I typed away. So that's been huge. And then just lately, opera has been really striking me. I've been reading some of the essays of Mary Ruefle, and she turned me on to some really fantastic opera.
That's interesting. We know Mary. She was a really, really close friend of my late husband's, Jack Myers, up in Vermont College. They taught together. And Ralph Angel, who's going to be reading with you at Last Rites of Spring in Vitruvian Park this Sunday, up in Addison. Ralph Angel is going to be there, and Ralph is very good friends with Mary Ruefle, too. So that said, I want to ask you a little bit. I know that there's been some problems with, you originally had an optioning with Warner Brothers Television for the Book of Harold, the Illegitimate Son of God, and I know some things have changed with that because of Warner Brothers themselves. But what was it like to suddenly have media approach you about optioning your book?
You know, it was pretty fantastic. That was pretty wonderful. It was interesting too because I've worked with Warner Brothers. I sold a script to them, and I've worked on projects with them, and I've worked with other like Disney and Fox. But all these folks that I work with in the screenwriting world are not very aware of me as a novelist and a short story writer. That's sort of a secondary thing. They're like, well, that's fantastic. We're glad you're doing the artsy thing. But when you come to us, we really want you to write us a funny movie that Paul Rudd can be in or something, which I'm happy to do. So the Warner Brothers Television, they were not aware of me as a screenwriter when they discovered my book. They said, they basically saw the title and the cover and were intrigued by it and picked it up at a bookstore, one of the executives from Warner Brothers Television. And I was thrilled. It was a really interesting experience. And even better was, at first they didn't want me necessarily involved in the writer. They're like, you're a novelist. And then they heard I was a screenwriter. They're like, well, let's hear your take. Come on in. And I got to basically be the head writer of the pitch of how it would be envisioned as a television show. And the thrill of that was, and luckily I've had a chance to experience it now with a couple of pieces, of adapting my own work into a different format was fantastic. It was a chance to reimagine. It was a chance to really tone in on the differences of the two different disciplines of what makes a television show or a visual medium like film work and what doesn't work, that you have to leave inside the novel and wait for someone to read the novel. Going back and forth, it allowed me to go to the same world, same themes, same characters, but investigate them in a whole new way, like a new language. It was great.
That makes you think about all that's going on these days with Game of Thrones. And, they have Game of Thrones watching parties, and the changes that are going on between the book and the television show, which is a really interesting point of what's happening in literature today. The whole literary arts are at a juncture, between media, the internet, etc. And I noticed that you were using Twitter to great advantage. What advice do you have for writers as we face this brave new world of literature sort of transforming and kind of melding into these other digital and media forms? Do you have any advice?
Yeah. I do. I would say first and foremost, forget all about it. I think it's very true, and it's something worthy of talking about and thinking about at some point, but it has nothing to do with being alone in front of a blank page. I'm a big believer that the internet is a very dangerous and powerful thing, and it's more dangerous than whiskey to writers. And whiskey can be really dangerous in itself. And the reason I believe this, especially the internet and that aspect, Twitter and Facebook, it's twofold. First is, anytime you're writing online, be it Facebook or Twitter, we're aware that we're in public space. We're aware to be careful of what we write, careful of the words we choose, careful of our spelling, because almost immediately it's going to be in front of possibly 1 billion people. So we have to be careful. Mm-hmm. And also, the second thing is, we're playing ping pong. We're constantly responding to other people's ideas. We're waiting for them to respond to us, to either forward us or like us or favorite us or make a comment so we can make a comment. Public ping pong is not the game of writing. The game of writing is when you're alone. You're alone in a private space where you can put down the most offensive, surprising confessions that you didn't even know you were confessing yourself as you write. You're typing so fast because you've got that freedom of privacy. No one has to see this until you've sharpened it and polished it. At that point, in the first draft, it should be for you and you alone, so you can have that freedom to not be publicly seen. And the second thing is, you're not playing ping pong with anybody. You're not responding to anybody. You're going deeper and deeper and deeper into yourself, into your story, into your themes. And you can't do that if you get your mind into the asset of, or the place of, like, I'm waiting for a response and I'm responding to what they're going to respond to me. So even like a minute or two checking email when you're writing takes you out of the mindset that you need, maybe for an hour or two, what you need to write your fiction.
That's really, really, really interesting. I guess it comes down to sort of keeping your eye on the prize, and the prize is telling your story. It's not about publishing the book or getting in a movie. It's about getting the story out there, whatever that might be.
That is well said.
I'm going to just take right here and hold up your book. It looks like it's right here. It's called How Best to Avoid Dying. And I love the blurb that's on the back that talks about it being divinely weird and what Franz Kafka would have written if he lived in Central Texas. Can you tell us a little bit about what is in this book, why people should buy it, and what makes it so divinely weird?
I like that quote as well. That was, I think, from Neil Pollock, who's a writer I really admire. Yeah, that's right. If Franz Kafka had watched, I think, too many midnight movies and lived in Central Texas, he'd be Owen Egerton. And I do watch too many midnight movies. The book, is they're short stories, and in short stories, I feel there's even more room for quick play. There's more room to go to bizarre places. And this is as Ashley was pointing out while writing this book, it was a lot of jazz, specifically Charles Mingus. And Charles Mingus has a great knack for composition, of crafting and creating moments of feeling and emotion and themes, but also, bam, will surprise you. A bass line would take off and go in places you wouldn't expect it, and two horns will play against each other, and it creates this disharmony that makes its own harmony. I think in this collection, I was exploring death, and I was exploring concepts of God, and I was exploring it with a lot of humor. Which allowed me to take characters to bizarre places, spelling bees, where if you get the wrong word, you're dropped into a pit to your death. A Christian youth camp where all the counselors realize that if one of us accidentally dies, it makes the kids a little more emotional, more able to accept Jesus into their hearts. So why doesn't one of us die each week? Crazy adventures. I imagine Lazarus after Jesus raised him from the grave, that Lazarus is just walking the earth for the next 2,000 years and currently living in a shabby one-room apartment in downtown New York. So I had a chance to just explore all these different stories and have a lot of fun with them.
Well, that's cool. Now, riffing on that, okay, how do you reconcile your divine weirdness with your picket fence family life of being a husband and a dad of 2 kids?
Well, that's a great question. There's been a lot of interesting articles over the last week or so, I guess because of Father's Day. The relationship between being a father and a writer. And I've had some great conversations with fellow friends who are parents and also writers. My life isn't very picket fence, though, here. I live in South Austin, and if you drove by my house, you'd think, oh, how sad that a tornado just hit that one particular house, and and it looks like a Toys R Us was in the tornado and scattered things. My kids force me, they invite me to a playfulness of creativity, which sometimes in the midst of deadlines and writing assignments, I forget. And they say, well, no, today you're putting down the computer because we have to go hunt Bigfoot because we think he's in the creek out back. Or we've painted a dozen rocks in our front yard and we're building a wall or whatever. My son made an 8-foot robot from an old VHS player and one of those automatic baseball throwers. And I'm constantly being invited into a world of creativity, which is a blast. Also, I'm lucky enough to live in Austin around a lot of creatives. So I find that the music we listen to on the radio or on the CD player, the kids know the writers' names. They're the songwriters who are neighbors. The paintings on the wall are painted by friends who live down the street. The books on our shelves are written by friends. This was painted by a friend of mine. This is by another one, Ethan Nazarian. It's kind of fun to be in a community where art doesn't necessitate being on the fringe or being on the outside. You can still have a family and be a starving artist. It just means your kids have to buy thrift clothes.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting. You actually kind of live in the rogue city of Texas. So you can kind of camouflage, because the whole city is sort of, different from the rest of Texas to a large extent. Although Texas is so regional and so big that different parts, you know, out by Big Bend, it's nothing like, you know, up here in Dallas. I mean, it's a very, very big city, big city. I mean, state. I want to ask you, Ashley, do we have any questions from the audience? Air quotes.
No questions so far.
We're inviting questions, folks. Just go ahead and type them in. Let us know. In the meantime, we actually only have a few more minutes, so you got to get those in. Wanted to say, okay, Saturday at 1 p.m. at the Writers Garret in Dallas, Texas, at 10809 Garland Road, you're going to be teaching a class. And can you just tell us a little bit about this class so that we can get people registered at our website at writersgarret.org, not .com, .org, and Garret's GARRET.org, okay? Just tell us about your class.
Yeah, so my class is going to be going over taking dramatic ideas and putting them into your fiction or even your nonfiction as well. I'm taking a lot of the aspects that I've learned from screenwriting, and we'll be examining some scenes, some actual movies, and how they arrive at tension. And then also from novels, from short stories, from essays, and also from our own personal lives. It'll be a combination of class discussion and exercises. I find more and more that the type of writing that excites me as a writer and as a reader and as a viewer is those places where a character's life is forced to a certain amount of tension, where they are forced to face the tension between what they believe the world to be and how the world actually is. And when those two combine, where we believe the world to be and the actuality of the world, boom, story happens. And I'm also a big believer in turning up the hot spot of your story. I was recently talking to some other writers about how we do that. It's almost like when you wake up camping and you've let the fire burn down, but there's just enough of a flame. That's so much as a first draft. Like, you go through your first draft and, oh, there's just a flame there. And how do you turn that flame once again into a bonfire? And I think there's two things. You blow on it or you feed it. Those are the two things. You either offer obstacles for your hero, obstacles for your story, things that they have to overcome. That's going to feed the tension, the fire of your story, or you feed it with other characters, with other ideas, with other tensions, and you just put more and more flames and kindling around it, and soon enough, boom, that small fire burns bright.
That's
so those are going to be some of the aspects we'll be talking about.
Sorry, that ties in beautifully. Anybody who took our screenwriting workshops last weekend with Ellen Myers-Fontana, she was saying that you take the protagonist and you drag them through, you stress them out. I mean, you torture them, you stress them out, you deny fulfillment for them, and the more you do that, the more the story mounts, the more the conflict gets exciting. And she said, you know, whatever nice guy stuff you normally have in your day-to-day living, you have to let that go when you're writing, because you need to stress out your protagonist. It's
so true, and sometimes we forget, because it is our natural tendencies, just as nice human beings, is we want to avoid tension. We want to avoid conflict. If we see two people who dislike each other, oh, it's my wife and my college roommate, and they hate each other because they dated for a long time. That's not true. But in those kind of situations, our ideas, we keep them apart. We want them in different places. But as writers, our job is to take these two people who hate each other and shove them into rooms with no doors and make them live together. I mean, that's what we do. We are creators of a certain kind of tension, and that's exciting. Because that's when you find out who we really are. You find out who a character is when that character is in an impossible situation.
Well, it's tomorrow. I mean, Susie, no, it's on Saturday. This coming Saturday on June 21st at the Writers Garret at 1 p.m. You're going to be teaching this wonderful course. Anyway, that said, I really would like people to go to writersgarret.org, because if you go up into the top, there's several different links that they can hit, and one of them says says Literary Festival, and it will drag down the whole thing. They can read all about the course. They can read about the whole schedule, because you're also going to be, not only will you be doing a reading on Sunday, the 22nd, but you're also going to be talking a little bit on performance and the value of performance. And that's also very, very important. And there is a charge for the tuition for Saturday's registration, but Sunday is totally free. So I'd really like to invite everybody to come to join the class, and also come out to Last Rites of Spring on Sunday. And is there anything else that you would like to say, sort of a takeaway?
You know, I would. You know, I so much enjoyed working with the writers in the Writers Garret and teaching workshops here in Austin. It actually inspired something fantastic for my wife and I. She's a writing consultant and teaches workshops on creativity and writing as well. So we started writing a book about it. We've been putting together a book, some of the essays that I've written for Huffington Post, and the exercises we've developed from improv and performance and how it works in the writing and creative writing world. We're writing a book called This Word Now. And it's been super exciting. We're doing a Kickstarter to support the writing of the book, so people can pre-order the book. That's going on right now. And I'm finding that Kickstarter for This Word Now so inspiring, because I felt really vulnerable putting this out there, but it's been incredible to see how many people are excited about talking and thinking and supporting books that center on the writing craft. Well, the course on Saturday is about putting putting drama into your fiction. Yeah. So I really hope it's going to help with, probably characters and just the way you add tension and make your fiction, or I guess even if you're a creative nonfiction writer, how to make that more powerful. So really would like to thank Owen for talking to us. And on Sunday you'll also be reading with a number of other writers. Joyce King, William Wendt is coming from Lubbock, Ralph Angel's coming from Los Angeles. We're going to have Kathleen Kent, David Hale Smith. It's just a lot of wonderful writers, of which we're very privileged to have you as well. Again, it's at Vitruvian Park, Last Rites of Spring, and the reason for that is because spring really changes on Saturday, so it's Last Rites of Spring. It turns to summer. And come on out and they have a kids zone. So if you got kids and you want to go hang with the grown-ups, you can do that. And I'd like to also thank the National Endowment for the Arts for starting the Writers Studio, the City of Dallas Office of Cultural Affairs, the Texas Commission on the Arts, and Heritage Auctions, and our individual supporters and members for making the Writers Studio chats possible. Thank you very much, Owen, for joining us. Thank you, Ashley, for helping to produce. And I'm Thea Temple. Thank you.